The station floated in the darkness like a forgotten dream. It was called Baiko 7, and it sat at the very edge of known space, where the stars grew thin and the void stretched forever. 43 souls lived inside its metal walls. 12 of them were human. The rest were villains, tall beings with silver skin and eyes like polished stones. They had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years before humanity even learned to make fire. Dahan worked the night shift in the communications room. He was 24 years old, with tired eyes and hands that moved across his console like water. The villains called him the Cub when they thought he could not hear. Sometimes they said it when they knew he could. It was their way of reminding him that humans were new to space, young, foolish, barely worth noticing. He did not argue with them. He simply did his work. The communications room was small and cold. Screens covered every wall, showing rivers of data that never stopped flowing. Most of it was noise, cosmic radiation, distant pulsars singing their endless songs, the background hum of a universe that did not care about the tiny creatures listening to it. Dohan's job was to find patterns in the noise. It was boring work. Important, but boring. The senior officers gave it to him because they believed it required no real skill. They were wrong, but Dohan never corrected them. Tonight, something was different. He noticed it first as a feeling. A coldness in his stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. He had learned to trust such feelings. His grandmother had taught him that. She used to say that the body knows things before the mind can understand them. He looked at his screens more carefully. The data streams looked normal. The patterns looked familiar. But somewhere in the noise, something was hiding. Dohan began to work. He ran the data through filter after filter, peeling away layers of cosmic static like skin from an onion. His fingers moved faster. His heart began to beat harder. Sweat formed on his forehead, even though the room was cold. 1 hour passed. Then 2. And then he found it. It was buried deep in the radiation, hidden so well that any normal scan would miss it completely. A pattern. A repeating sequence of signals that could not exist naturally. Someone had put it there. Someone was using the cosmic background as a hiding place. Dohan stared at the pattern. His hands had stopped moving. His breath had stopped coming. He knew this pattern, not from his training, not from any official database. He knew it from the small data chip that hung around his neck on a simple cord. His grandmother's final gift. She had recorded everything she remembered before she died. Everything the official histories had forgotten or chosen to ignore. His grandmother had been a survivor of the Hollow War. The Hollow. Even the name made Dohan feel sick. They had appeared 70 years ago, coming from somewhere beyond mapped space. They did not talk. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed. Stations, ships, entire colonies. 11 billion humans had died in 18 months. Then the Hollow had vanished, disappearing as mysteriously as they had come. The Velans did not believe the Hollow were real. They thought the war was human exaggeration, human drama. They had seen no evidence, so they chose to believe it was a story humans told to make themselves seem important. But Dohan's grandmother had been there. She had watched her family dissolve into nothing. She had heard the silence that came before death, and she had recorded the signal patterns the Hollow used when they were hunting. Dohan was looking at that pattern now. His hands began to shake. Not from fear alone, but from the weight of what he had to do. If he was wrong, he would destroy his career. The Velans would laugh at him. His own people might never trust him again. But if he was right, and he did nothing, everyone on this station would die. He made his choice in less than 3 seconds. His fingers flew across the console. He opened the emergency channel, the one that connected directly to Earth Command. He activated the oldest encryption protocol in existence. a method that did not send signals in the normal way. Instead, it hid messages inside the cosmic radiation itself. Passive, almost invisible. The Hollow hunted by detecting active signals. This method might slip past them. He typed 3 words, Hollow, approaching, seal dot, then he sent the command that would trigger the station's emergency lockdown. Alarms began to scream. Red lights flooded every corridor. Blast doors, thick enough to stop a missile, slammed shut throughout the station. The air recyclers shifted to isolation mode. Every section became a sealed box, cut off from every other section. The entire process took 11 seconds. Dahan sat back in his chair. His hands were still shaking. His heart was beating so hard, he could hear it in his ears. He had just locked 43 people inside, a metal tomb based on a pattern he had learned from his dead grandmother. The door to his communications room burst open. Commander Yuna stood there, her face a mask of controlled fury. She was a small woman with short gray hair and eyes that could cut through steel. Report, she said. Just one word. She did not waste time on questions she could ask later. The Hollow, Dohan said. His voice was steadier than he expected. They're coming. I found their hunting signal in the cosmic background. Yuna's face did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. She was old enough to remember the stories. Old enough to know what that name meant. You certain? My grandmother was a survivor. She recorded everything. The pattern matches. For a long moment, Yuna said nothing. Then she nodded once and activated her communicator. All hands, this is the commander. The lockdown is authorized. Maintain positions and await further orders. She looked at Dohan. In her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Respect, fear, and perhaps a small amount of hope. If you're wrong, she said quietly, your career is over. If I'm wrong, Dohan replied, I'll accept whatever punishment comes. Yuna turned and left. The blast door sealed behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. Dawn turned back to his screens. The pattern was still there, pulsing in the darkness like a heartbeat. It was getting stronger. That meant they were getting closer. He thought about his grandmother. She had spent her last years in a small apartment on Earth, surrounded by memories that no one else wanted to remember. She had told him stories that gave him nightmares. She had made him promise to watch the stars, to listen to the silence. They will come back, she had told him, her old hands holding his young ones. Everyone wants to forget, but I know. They are still out there. And when they return, someone must be ready. Dohan had been 12 years old when she made him promise. He had not understood then. He understood now. He was ready. The screens flickered. New data began to pour in from the external sensors. 17 signatures, massive and dark, were emerging from fold space at the edge of the system. The Hollow had arrived, and Dawn, the cub, the young human that nobody took seriously, was the only one who had seen them coming. He closed his eyes for just a moment. Then he opened them and began to work. The night was far from over, and if his people were going to survive, he would need to give them every advantage he could find. The station was sealed. The enemy was here. And somewhere in the distance, Earth had received his warning. Now all they could do was wait, and hope that silence would be enough to save them. Korvath had been meditating when the alarms began. He was the high researcher of the Velan delegation, a position of great honor among his people. For 300 years he had studied the mysteries of deep space. He had seen wonders that human minds could not imagine. He had earned the right to be treated with respect, and now some human child had locked him inside his own quarters like a prisoner. He stood before the sealed blast door, his silver hands pressed flat against the cold metal. His stone-colored eyes burned with anger. Behind him, Two junior Velans watched nervously, unsure what to do. "Open this door," Korvath commanded. "I cannot, High Researcher," the station's computer replied. "Emergency Protocol 7 has been activated. All sections are sealed until the commander gives the release order." "On whose authority was this protocol activated?" "Communications Officer Dawn, under emergency provisions." Korvath felt his anger grow cold and sharp. The cub, the human child who sat in the communications room playing with signals like a toy. That insignificant creature had dared to seal a Velan High Researcher inside his chambers. He activated his personal communicator. "Commander Yuna, explain this outrage immediately." There was a pause. Then Yuna's voice came through, calm and steady. "High Researcher, we have detected what may be a serious threat. The lockdown is a precaution. What threat could possibly justify this violation of protocol? I am the senior Velan authority on this station. You should have consulted me before taking such action. There was no time. The threat is the Hollow." Silence. Korvath felt something twist in his chest. He had heard the name before. The humans spoke of the Hollow the way children spoke of monsters in the dark. It was a story they told to frighten themselves. A myth they used to explain their own failures. "The Hollow are a human fantasy," Korvath said. "There is no evidence they ever existed. With respect, High Researcher, 11 billion dead humans is evidence enough. And our sensors are now detecting 17 unknown vessels approaching the station." Korvath closed his eyes. His mind raced through possibilities. A mistake. A malfunction. A human error born of fear and ignorance. That was the most likely explanation, but a small part of him, a part he did not like to acknowledge, felt the first cold touch of doubt. "I demand to be released," he said. "I will see this evidence for myself." "Negative. The lockdown cannot be lifted until we confirm the threat level. I will keep you informed." The channel closed. Korvath stood very still, his silver face showing nothing. But inside, something ancient and terrible was beginning to wake. In the communications room, Dohan watched the screens with burning eyes. The 17 shapes were fully visible now, caught by the station's long-range sensors. They did not look like ships. They looked like wounds in space, dark patches where the stars simply stopped existing. Commander Yuna stood beside him, her arms crossed. Lieutenant Jian was there too, a tall woman with a soldier's stance and a face that showed no fear. She was Dohan's direct superior, the one who had approved his assignment to the night shift. "Talk to me," Yuna said. "What are we looking at?" Dohan pointed to the largest shape on the screen. "That one is approximately 3 kilometers long. The others are smaller, but not by much. They're not reflecting any light. They're actually absorbing it. That matches the old war records exactly. Weapons? Unknown. During the war, they didn't use weapons the way we understand them. They just took things apart, dissolved them at the molecular level." Jian leaned closer to the screen. Her eyes were hard. "Can we fight them?" "No. We have defensive systems, but nothing that could stop even one of those ships. During the war, it took entire battle fleets to destroy a single hollow vessel, and even then the casualties were enormous." "So what do we do?" Dohan took a breath. This was the part that scared him most. "We stay silent. The hollow hunt by detecting active signals. Any transmission, any scan, anything that reaches out into space will draw them directly to us. The station lockdown has shut down all external communications. As long as we stay quiet, there's a chance they won't notice us." "A chance," Yuna repeated. "It's the best chance we have." Yuna looked at the screens for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Jian, inform all sections. No transmissions. No scans. No attempts to contact anyone outside this station. Anyone who breaks this order will be confined immediately. Yes, Commander. Jian left. Yuna remained, staring at the dark shapes that drifted closer with every passing minute. Your grandmother, she said quietly. The one who survived the war. What did she tell you about them? Dohan reached up and touched the data chip around his neck. She said they were patient. They didn't rush. They circled their prey like sharks, waiting for any sign of weakness. And she said they were empty. Not evil, not cruel. Just empty. They consumed because it was their nature, the way fire consumes wood. Did she ever see them leave without attacking? Once. A convoy she was traveling with shut down all power and drifted in the dark for 6 days. The hollow circled them the whole time. On the 7th day, they left. She never knew why. Yuna's face was pale. So we wait. In Section 4, the Velen technicians were growing restless. They'd been sealed inside their laboratory for nearly an hour now, with no clear explanation and no contact with their high researcher. Mirn, a young Velen with nervous hands, paced back and forth across the room. This is madness. The humans have lost their minds. We should force the doors open. His companion, an older Velen named Saren, shook his head. The blast doors are reinforced. We cannot break through them. Then we use the maintenance hatches. They have manual releases. We can reach the escape pods and leave this cursed station. Saren looked uncertain. The commander gave orders. A human commander, obeying the panic of a human child. Our people have been traveling the stars for millennia. We do not hide from shadows and stories. Mirn moved toward the maintenance hatch in the corner of the room. His hands were already reaching for the manual release when the door behind them opened. Lieutenant Jian stepped through. She took in the scene with one quick glance. Mirn's hand on the hatch. Saren's frightened eyes. The tension in the air. Step away from that hatch, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. Something that promised violence. Mirn turned to face her. He was taller than her by half a meter. His silver skin seemed to glow with contempt. You have no authority over me, human. I am leaving this station. If you open that hatch, you will trigger an external alert. The Hollow will detect us. Everyone on this station will die. The Hollow do not exist. They are a human lie. Jian moved. She was fast, faster than Mirn expected. Her body flowed like water. One moment she was standing at the door. The next, she was beside him, her arm locked around his throat, her knee driving into the back of his leg. Mirn went down hard. He tried to rise, but Jian's grip was like iron. Saren took a step forward, then stopped when he saw her eyes. There was no anger there. No hatred. Just cold, absolute certainty. I have buried friends, Jian said. I have watched humans die in ways you cannot imagine. And I've spent my whole life preparing for the day the darkness came back. So believe me when I tell you this. If you try to open that hatch, I will break every bone in your body before you touch the release. And I will not lose a moment of sleep over it. Mirn stopped struggling. Something in her voice convinced him that she meant every word. Jian released him and stepped back. Her breathing had not even changed. Return to your stations, she said. Wait for orders. And pray that the cub is right. Because if he is, silence is the only thing keeping us alive. She left. The blast door sealed behind her in the darkness of space. The 17 ships drifted closer. Their surfaces rippled like living tissue. Their hunger was ancient and bottomless. And inside the station, 43 souls held their breath and waited for death to pass them by. The first hollow ship reached scanning range at 0347 station time. Dohan watched it on the passive sensors, the only system still running. Active scans would have given them away immediately. Passive sensors only listened. They did not call out. They did not announce their presence. The ship was beautiful in a terrible way. It moved through space like a living thing, its dark surface flowing and shifting as if it were made of liquid shadow. There were no visible engines, no lights, no markings of any kind. It simply existed, a hole in the universe shaped like hunger that Duhan had not slept in 18 hours. His eyes burned. His hands trembled slightly as they rested on the console. But he could not look away. He needed to understand. He needed to find anything that might help them survive. Commander Yuna sat in a chair beside him. She had not left the communications room since the lockdown began. Dark circles had formed under her eyes, but her face remained calm. "How long until it reaches us?" she asked. "At current speed, approximately 4 hours. But they might change course. They might speed up. We have no way of knowing. And the others?" Dahun checked the screens. Spreading out. They're forming a search pattern. Classic hunting behavior. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were harder than before. "Tell me about the war. Everything your grandmother told you. I need to understand what we're facing." "We're facing." Dawn took a breath. The memories were painful, passed down like wounds that never fully healed. "It started without warning," he said. 70 years ago, the Hollow appeared in the outer colonies. They came from a direction no one was watching, from beyond the maps. The first colony they hit was called New Harmony. 14,000 people. They were gone in 6 hours. Gone? Absorbed. Dissolved. The Hollow don't kill the way we understand killing. They break things down at the molecular level and take the material into themselves. Bodies, buildings, ships. Everything becomes part of them. Yuna's face showed no expression, but her hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "The military responded," Dohong continued. "The battle fleets, orbital defenses, everything humanity had. It wasn't enough. The Hollow moved through our forces like wind through grass. For every ship we destroyed, we lost 100. For every colony we saved, 10 more fell. How did we survive? Luck, sacrifice, and eventually they just left. No one knows why. Some think we hurt them badly enough that they decided we weren't worth the cost. Others think they were just passing through, like locusts moving to a new field. My grandmother believed they went to sleep somewhere in the dark between galaxies. Waiting. Waiting for what? Dohan touched the data chip around his neck. She didn't know, but she always said they would wake up again. She spent her whole life preparing for it, making records, studying patterns, teaching anyone who would listen. You were listening. I was the only one. On the screen, the nearest Hollow ship changed direction slightly. It was turning toward the station. Dohan felt his heart stop for just a moment. "It's coming this way," he whispered. Yuna stood up. Her voice was steady when she spoke into the station intercom. "All hands, this is the commander. We are entering the critical phase. Absolute silence is now required. No movement unless absolutely necessary. No conversation above a whisper. We are going to show the darkness that there is nothing here worth finding." She closed the channel and looked at Dohan. "What else can we do?" Dohan thought about everything his grandmother had taught him. The stories, the patterns, the desperate measures that sometimes worked and often failed. "There's one thing," he said slowly. "During the war, some ships survived by reducing their energy signatures to almost nothing. They shut down everything except basic life support. Made themselves cold, dead. The Hollow seemed to lose interest in things that appeared already destroyed. Can we do that? Maybe. It would mean turning off the artificial gravity. reducing heating to minimum levels. We would be cold and uncomfortable, but alive. Yuna nodded. Do it. The next hour was misery. The gravity faded away, leaving everyone floating in the cold darkness. The heating dropped until breath became visible clouds of white mist. The station grew quiet in a way that felt unnatural, as if the silence itself had waited. Duhan remained at his console, his fingers blue with cold. He watched the hollow ship approach. It was close now, close enough that the passive sensors could detect the strange energy patterns that surrounded it. Patterns that matched nothing in any scientific database. Patterns that spoke of a technology so advanced it might as well be magic. The ship stopped. It hung in space, less than 50 kilometers from the station. Its surface rippled slowly, like the skin of some enormous beast breathing in its sleep. Dohan could feel it somehow, even through the metal walls and the vacuum of space. A presence, an awareness, something old and hungry turning its attention toward them. Minutes passed. Each one felt like an hour. Then the ship moved again. It drifted closer. 20 kilometers. 10. 5. Dohan held his breath. Beside him, Yuna's hand found his shoulder and gripped hard. The ship was so close now that it filled the entire screen. Its surface was not smooth as it appeared from a distance. It was covered with patterns, shapes that moved and changed constantly. They looked almost like faces, almost like screams frozen in dark glass. 1 kilometer. Half a kilometer. And then it stopped. For what felt like forever, nothing happened. The ship simply hung there, its massive form blocking out the stars. Dohan could see details now that he wished he could forget. The surface seemed to be reaching toward the station, forming tendrils of shadow that stretched and retracted like curious fingers. It was testing them, probing, looking for any sign of life. Dohan thought about his grandmother. She had survived something like this. She had floated in the darkness for days, surrounded by the bodies of friends who had died from cold and fear. She had watched the hollow circle her ship like vultures. And she had lived. If she could do it, so could he. He closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. Slow, steady, in and out. Like meditation, like prayer. Somewhere in the station, someone coughed. The sound was tiny, barely a whisper, but in the absolute silence, it seemed to echo forever. Dohan's eyes snapped open. On the screen, the hollow ship shuddered. Something was happening. The surface was moving faster now, the pattern swirling in what might have been excitement or hunger or something else entirely. The shadow tendrils reached further, stretching toward the station like hands reaching for prey. And then, impossibly, they stopped. The tendrils retracted. The surface calmed. The ship began to drift backward, slowly at first, then faster. Dohan watched, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. The ship was leaving. It was actually leaving. Within minutes, it had rejoined the other hollow vessels. They hung in the distance for a while longer, dark shapes against the darker void. Then, one by one, they began to move away. The hunt was moving on. Dohan slumped back in his chair. His whole body was shaking now, from cold and relief and the release of tension he had been holding for hours. Yuna's hand was still on his shoulder. When he looked up at her, he saw tears on her cheeks. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Dohan shook his head. "We did it. All of us. Everyone who stayed silent. Everyone who trusted." He looked at the screen one more time. The hollow were still visible, moving toward the edge of sensor range. They were not gone. They would never truly be gone. But for now, for this moment, they had survived. And sometimes that was enough. The hours that followed were the longest of Dohan's life. The hollow had pulled back, but they had not left. 17 dark shapes still circled the edge of sensor range, moving in patterns that Dohan was slowly beginning to understand. He had not slept in 31 hours. His body ached. His eyes felt like they were filled with sand. But every time he considered resting, he looked at the screens and saw those shapes moving in the darkness, and sleep became impossible. Lieutenant Jian brought him food at some point. Protein bars and water. He ate without tasting anything. "You should rest," she said. "I can watch the screens." "No." His voice was hoarse. "I know their patterns. I've been studying them my whole life. If something changes, I'll notice before anyone else would." Jian studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled a chair next to his and sat down. "Then I'll wait with you." They sat in silence for a while. The cold had eased slightly. Commander Yuna had authorized a small increase in heating once the hollow pulled back. But the gravity was still off, and everything felt wrong and weightless. "The Velans are getting restless," Jian said finally. "Corveth has been demanding to speak with the commander. He wants answers." "What kind of answers?" "He wants to know how we knew. How a human junior officer knew something that Velan sensors missed completely." Dohan touched the data chip around his neck. "They never believed the war happened. They never studied it. They thought we made it all up. And now? Now they're scared. And scared people do dangerous things." As if to prove his point, an alarm began to flash on Dohan's console. Someone in Section 7 was attempting to access the external communications array. Dohan's hands flew across the controls. "I'm locking it down. They're trying to send a distress signal." "Who?" "Velan Life Science. 2 of them." Jian was already moving. She pushed off from her chair and floated toward the door, her body twisting in the zero gravity with practiced ease. "Stop them," Dohan said. "If that signal gets out, the hollow will be on us in minutes." Jian did not answer. She was already gone. In Section 7. 2 Velan technicians huddled over a communications panel. Their names were Moran and Saren, the same 2 Jian had confronted earlier. Moran's hands shook as he worked, trying to bypass the lockout codes that Dohan had put in place. "Almost there," he muttered. "Once we send the signal, the Velan High Command will dispatch a rescue fleet. We'll be saved." Saren looked uncertain. The human said sending signals would attract the creatures. The human is a child playing with things he doesn't understand. Our technology is far superior. Our signals are encrypted in ways the hollow could never detect. But what if he's right? Moran spun around, his stone-colored eyes blazing. He is not right. Humans are primitives. They see monsters in every shadow. They let fear control them. We are Velans. We do not hide from darkness like frightened animals. He turned back to the panel. One more code. One more bypass. And then he would save everyone from this human madness. The door opened. Jian floated through, her body moving with the deadly grace of a predator. Behind her, 2 human security officers followed, their weapons drawn. "Step away from the panel," Jian said. Moran did not move. "You cannot stop me. This is for everyone's good. If you send that signal, everyone on this station dies, including you. Your threats mean nothing. I am protecting my people from human incompetence." Jian moved. In zero gravity, combat was different. There was no floor to push against, no weight to anchor movements. But Jian had trained for this. She used the walls, the ceiling, anything solid to redirect her momentum. Moran never had a chance. One moment he was reaching for the panel. The next, Jian's elbow was crashing into his temple. He spun backward, unconscious before his body finished rotating. Saren raised his hands in surrender. His face was pale with fear. "I did not want this," he said quickly. "I tried to stop him. Please." Jian studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded to the security officers. "Take them both to the holding cells." Separate rooms. No communication with anyone until the commander authorizes it. As the officers dragged the Velans away, Jian floated to the communications panel. Dawen's lockout was still in place. The signal had not been sent. She closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of relief. Then she activated her communicator. Dawen, the situation is contained. How are the Hollow responding? There was a pause. Then Dohan's voice came through, heavy with exhaustion but steady. No change. They're still circling. I don't think they detected the attempted transmission. Good. I'm heading back to you. She found him exactly where she had left him, slumped in his chair, staring at screens that showed only darkness and distant shapes. When she entered, he did not look up. How did you know? She asked. Know what? That they would try something. You were already watching for it. Doan shrugged. It was a small movement, made awkward by the zero gravity. Fear makes people stupid. The Velans have never faced anything like this. They've spent 10,000 years believing they're the masters of the universe. Now they're trapped in a box, waiting for monsters they thought were fairy tales. Of course, they would try something desperate. Jian sat down beside him. For a while, they watched the screens together in silence. My grandmother used to tell me stories, Dohon said finally. His voice was soft, almost dreaming. About the war. About the people she lost. About the things she had to do to survive. What kind of things? Hard things. Terrible things. Once, she had to choose between saving her brother and saving a ship full of strangers. She chose the strangers. Her brother died screaming while she flew away. Jian said nothing. There was nothing to say. She never forgave herself, Dohan continued. She carried that guilt for 60 years. But she also never stopped fighting. She said that survival wasn't about being brave or strong. It was about being willing to do whatever was necessary, even when it destroyed something inside you. He reached up and touched the data chip. She gave me this before she died. All her memories. All her pain. She said someone needed to remember, because the universe wanted to forget. And you remembered. I remembered. On the screens, the hollow ships continued their slow dance at the edge of sensor range. But something was changing. Dohan leaned forward, his tired eyes suddenly sharp. They're moving, he said. Look, the formation is shifting. Jian studied the patterns. She could see it too. The ships were no longer circling randomly. They were forming a line, a chain of darkness pointing towards something in the distance. What does it mean? Dohan worked the console, pulling up charts and calculations. His fingers moved faster than they had in hours. They're following something. A signal, maybe. Or a migration pattern. I need to check the stellar maps. Minutes passed. Dohan compared the hollow formation to every known navigation route, every cosmic phenomenon that might attract such creatures. And then he found it. There, he said, pointing to a spot on the screen. A colony ship. The Eternal Dawn. 300,000 passengers in cryosleep, heading for a new world. It passed through this sector 2 days ago. Jian felt her blood turn cold. They're hunting it. Yes, and once they finish with the Eternal Dawn, they might come back for us. She stood up. We have to warn them. We can't. Any signal we send will draw the hollow directly to us. We would die, and the colony ship would still be destroyed. So we just sit here? We just watch 300,000 people die? Dohan closed his eyes. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Survival isn't about being brave or strong. It's about being willing to do whatever is necessary. We stay silent, he said. We survive. And when this is over, we make sure the galaxy knows what happened. We make sure no one ever forgets. Jian wanted to argue. Every instinct in her body screamed to do something, to fight, to save those innocent lives. But she looked at Dohan's face, and she saw the same pain she was feeling. He didn't want this either. But he understood, the way his grandmother had understood, that sometimes the only choice is between terrible and worse. She sat back down. Her hands were shaking. How long until they leave? Dohan checked his calculations. If I'm right about their pattern, approximately 3 hours. Then we wait another hour to be safe. Then we can break silence and contact Earth. And the colony ship? We pray. It's all we can do. They sat together in the darkness, watching the hollow move toward their prey. And somewhere in the void, 300,000 sleeping souls drifted toward a nightmare they would never wake from. This was the cost of survival. This was the price of remembering Dot, and Dawn, the cub, bore it all in silence. The hollow left at 0847 station time. 17 ships folded themselves into darkness and vanished, leaving nothing behind but empty space and the memory of fear. Dohan watched them go on his screens, his exhausted eyes tracking every movement until the last signature disappeared from sensor range. Even then, he did not move. He sat in his chair for another hour, watching, waiting, making sure they were truly gone. Commander Yuna was the one who finally broke the silence. "It's over," she said. Her voice was rough from hours of whispered commands and suppressed fear. "Send the signal. Let Earth know we're alive." Dohan's fingers moved across the console. After so many hours of enforced silence, the simple act of sending a transmission felt strange and dangerous. But the message went out, racing across the void at the speed of light. Beco-7 to Earth Command. Hollow contact survived. Station intact. Requesting immediate assistance. The response came faster than anyone expected. A battle fleet had already been dispatched when Dawn's original warning reached Earth. They had been racing toward the station for hours, preparing for the worst, expecting to find nothing but debris and ghosts. Instead, they found a miracle. The fleet arrived 6 hours after the hollow departed. 12 warships and 4 medical vessels, more firepower than the station had ever seen in one place. Commander Yuna met them at the docking port, her face pale but steady, her voice strong despite everything. Admiral Sunho was the first to board. He was an old man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. He looked around the station with an expression that mixed relief and disbelief. "You actually survived," he said. "When we got the warning, we thought we were coming to collect bodies." "We almost were bodies," Yuna replied. "If it wasn't for one of my officers, we would have been." "The one who sent the warning." "Dawn, yes?" "Yes, I want to meet him." They found Dawn still at his console. He had not slept in over 40 hours. His eyes were red and swollen. His hands trembled constantly. But when the Admiral entered the room, he forced himself to stand. "Sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Sunho studied him for a long moment. This was the one who had seen the hollow coming. This was the one who had remembered what everyone else wanted to forget. "How did you know?" the Admiral asked. Dawn reached up and touched the data chip around his neck. "My grandmother. She survived the First War. She spent her whole life recording everything she remembered. She made me promise to watch the stars. And you kept that promise." "I kept it." The Admiral nodded slowly. Something changed in his expression. Something that looked almost like hope. "The hollow attacked the colony ship," Dawn said. "The Eternal Dawn. 300,000 people. We couldn't warn them. We couldn't do anything." "I know." "We received their final transmission. The ship was lost with all hands." Dawn closed his eyes. He had known this was coming, but knowing and feeling were different things. 300,000 lives, gone because he had stayed silent. "You did the right thing," the Admiral said. His voice was gentle, almost fatherly. If you had broken silence, you would have died too. And we would have lost the only person who truly understands what we're facing. It doesn't feel right. It never does. Survival rarely feels like victory. But you saved 43 lives on this station. And more importantly, you proved something that the galaxy needed to know. What's that? That the Hollow can be survived. That they can be fooled. That there is a way to fight them, even if it means hiding in the darkness and waiting for death to pass. In the days that followed, the galaxy learned what had happened at Baiko 7. News spread across every world. Every station, every ship that could receive a signal. The Hollow had returned. And for the first time in 70 years, humanity had encountered them and lived. High Researcher Korvath requested a meeting with Dohan on the second day after the rescue fleet arrived. Dohan agreed, though he was not sure what to expect. The last time he had spoken to a Velen, they had been trying to send a signal that would have killed everyone. They met in the station's observation deck, a small room with a wide window that looked out at the stars. Korvath stood with his back to the door, his silver hands clasped behind him. "I owe you an apology," Korvath said. He did not turn around. "My people called you a cub. We thought your war stories were exaggerations. We were wrong." Dohan said nothing. He waited. "For 300 years, I have studied the mysteries of the universe," Korvath continued. "I have seen wonders beyond description. I believed I understood the nature of things. But in the darkness of those hours, sealed inside my quarters, I realized something." He turned to face Dohan. His stone-colored eyes were soft now, almost vulnerable. "Understanding is not wisdom. Knowledge is not memory. Your people carry scars that we cannot see, lessons written in blood that we chose to ignore. You remembered what we forgot. You saw what we refused to look at." Korvath lowered his head in a gesture that Dohan recognized from his studies. It was the Velen sign of profound respect, rarely given to anyone outside their own species. "We called you cub," Korvath said. "We were the children. You remembered what we chose to forget." Dohan felt something shift in his chest. For his whole life, he had been told that humans were newcomers, barely worth noticing. Now one of the oldest beings in the galaxy was bowing to him. "Get up," Dohan said quietly. "We're all students in the dark. The only difference is that my grandmother was a better teacher than anyone realized." Korvath rose. Something like a smile crossed his silver face. "Tell me about her. Tell me everything she taught you. The Velen people need to learn what you know. It will take a long time. I have 300 years left to live. Time is something I have plenty of." In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The galactic news networks carried the story of Baiko 7 to every corner of known space. Defense protocols were rewritten. Signal arrays were redesigned. Emergency plans were created for every station and ship that might encounter the Hollow, and humanity's reputation shifted. No longer were they the reckless newcomers who had somehow stumbled into space. Now they were the species that remembered. The ones who carried the old wounds and the old wisdom. The ones who knew that the darkness was real. Dohan was offered promotions, commendations, medals. He refused them all. Fame felt wrong when 300,000 people had died while he stayed silent. Instead, he asked for one thing: permission to build a memorial. A small marker in the station's observation deck, dedicated to the passengers of the Eternal Dawn and to all the victims of the Hollow War. The marker was made of simple stone, shipped from Earth at great expense. On its surface were carved 2 lines. "We remember those who were lost. We honor their silence with our own." Dohan visited the marker every day. He would stand before it, touch the cold stone, and think about his grandmother. She would have understood. She always said that the hardest part of survival was living with the choices you had to make. On the 31st day after the attack, Chen and Jian found him at the marker. She stood beside him in silence for a while, looking at the carved words. "The Admiral wants you to come to Earth," she said finally. "They're forming a new division, a task force dedicated to studying the Hollow. They want you to lead it. Me? You're the only one who truly understands them. Your grandmother's research, your own observations from the attack. There's no one else." Dohan touched the data chip around his neck. He thought about his grandmother, alone in her small apartment, spending decades preserving memories that no one wanted to hear. She would have hated it, he said. All this attention. She just wanted people to remember. She never wanted to be famous. But she would have been proud of you. Maybe. I don't know. Jian put a hand on his shoulder. The Hollow are still out there. They're not done. Somewhere in the darkness, they're gathering, preparing for whatever comes next. We need people who understand that. We need you. Dohan looked at the memorial one last time. Then he turned to face the stars outside the window. My grandmother told me something else, he said slowly. Something I've never told anyone. What? She said the Hollow weren't leaving. During the First War, they weren't retreating. They were gathering. She believed they went somewhere to grow stronger, to prepare. She thought the First War was just a test, a probe, a way of measuring our strength. Jian felt a chill run down her spine. And the real attack? Still coming. Maybe in a year. Maybe in a century. But coming. She absorbed this in silence. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. Then we need to be ready. We need to remember. And we need people like you to make sure we never forget. Dohan nodded slowly. He had spent his whole life being overlooked. The cub, the junior officer, the one who sat in the dark and listened to noise. Now the darkness was listening back, and he was the only one who understood what it was saying. Tell the Admiral I'll come, he said. But I have one condition. What? The memorial stays. And every year, on the anniversary of the attack, we hold a moment of silence. For everyone we lost. For everyone we might still lose. So that no one ever forgets the cost. Jian smiled. It was a sad smile, heavy with the weight of what they had survived and what was still to come. I think you'll agree to that. They stood together at the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere in that vastness, the Hollow were moving, gathering, waiting. But humanity was waiting too. And this time, they would be ready. Because one young man had listened to his grandmother's stories. Because one signal from the cub had sealed a station before anyone could react. Because sometimes, in the darkest moments, the smallest voice is the one that matters most. Dohan touched the data chip one last time. I remember, he whispered to the stars. I promise. I remember. And the universe, vast and cold and full of terrors, seemed to pause for just a moment, as if listening to the promise of a species that would never stop fighting, never stop hoping, never stop remembering the price of survival. The story was not over. The darkness was still coming, but the dawn would be ready,